Hello, and a very warm welcome to Quadriga, coming to you from Berlin. I'm Brian Thomas. Thanks so much for joining us today as we look at Europe's populism and what's behind it. This week in Italy, voters swept away a reform-minded government that was a key ally for Chancellor Angela Merkel. But across the border in Austria, they failed in their bid to stop a pro-EU president from taking office. Well, in Austria's election for president, the pro-European candidate Alexander Van der Bellen defeated the far-right FPO's Norbert Hofer by a wide margin in an election result few had expected. It was a very different story, though, in Italy, where Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has resigned after losing a referendum on constitutional reform. The driving force behind his defeat was the populist five-star movement of Pepe Grillo. Well, in spite of their setback in Austria, are Europeans' anti-establishment parties unstoppable, or can the political mainstream launch a counter-offensive to contain them? To talk about that, I'm very happy to be joined by the Austrian journalist Ewald König. He writes for a number of publications, including Germany's Die Zeit. He says the EU won't be able to easily resist the populists, but it will have to live with them and become much more convincing. Also with us today, Alan Posener, an Anglo-German author, regular commentator for the newspaper Die Welt. He says Europe suffers from modernization fatigue, and that explains the vote in Italy and the rise of the populists. But it also strengthens centrists like Angela Merkel in Germany. We also have DW journalist Federica Baggio. She's from Italy and has been out talking to young voters there. She says Renzi lost this most important ally, his most important ally in the fight for change, young voters. But because those young voters gave in to the populists, they've now lost the chance to make the country better. Thanks to all of you for being here today. Federica, let's start off with you. Are we seeing in Italy right now a new youth revolution, a new youth rebellion?
I think that's a good way of putting it. Besides the size of the loss that Matteo Renzi had on Sunday, I think what was most striking was seeing so many young voters saying no. And they have, so it's almost 70% of young Italians voted no. So then you would expect young people to be at the forefront when it comes to promoting reforms and change. And I think we were expecting more of a Brexit-like scenario here. But instead, they were definitely in denial. So something there went extremely wrong.
Okay, what were the two big issues for youth voters? Was it migration? Was it the Eurozone? Was it both?
I think the biggest issue, I mean, I would put it this way. There has been a revolution in this referendum from young voters, but not so much against the content of the referendum, the content of the proposal, this constitutional reform, but more against the current government, and I would say actually more against Matteo Renzi and his persona.
Okay. So you're saying it's wrapped up with the person of Matteo Renzi?
Yes.
Okay.
That's it.
Ewald König, what's your take on it? Is it all about the person Renzi, or is it about the issues, the complex issues facing Italy?
I think it was a very big mistake to combine the result of the referendum with the personal political future of this politician. Many politicians in the past have made this mistake, and he should have learned his lessons. But I could imagine that one day he will have his comeback after he's learned.
All right, so you think it also as well, it has a lot to do with Renzi, and here a political mistake, not so much his personality as Federica thinks. Let's hear from the people in Italy and what they said about a referendum that saw a large majority, about 70%, say no to calls to change the Constitution.
The fact that the No campaign won sends an important signal. People have had enough of budget cuts and enough of the neoliberal policies of Renzi's government and those who came before him.
We won, and that's great. Things simply can't continue as they are. The Italian people can't take it anymore. They wanted change, and they got it. If the politicians don't understand this, we'll make them understand it.
So far, the government has ruined us, like with the pension reforms. It's awful, and for young people, it's a disaster. let's hope things get better.
We'll make them understand, as we just heard from that man there. The anger there, Alan Posener, very palpable. When you look at Italy today and see what's happening there, what do you think? We have this image of Italy as this core EU state. Is it anymore?
Well, it's never been true of all of Italy anyway. I mean, the South, Mezzogiorno, Sicily, has never really been part of that core Europe. Also, since the beginning of austerity, youth unemployment has soared, which I think explains part of the no vote. But one thing is, this was not, I don't think this was a vote against Europe or a vote even against reforms. It was a vote against a political attempt to secure an automatic majority for the party that got most votes. In other words, to strengthen the position of Rome. And I think people don't want that.
They objected to it.
They objected to that, and I think I can understand why. If we imagine the same thing in Germany, so the CDU gets 30% of the vote, so they automatically have 50% in the Bundestag. Would we want that? I, for one, would vote no. Even if Mrs. Merkel would say to me, yeah, but this is the only way we can change our country. I would say, well, if that's the only way, then we won't change it, rather than go that way. It's not democratic. I think the Italians voted wisely, actually.
OK, but if you voted so wisely, I'd like to, I'd have to jump in with Ewald here, because you were saying it was also, you agree with Alan, it was kind of a technical problem, and he shouldn't have linked, Renzi shouldn't have linked it, the referendum, to his personality. Still, he misread the public. Why? How did he misread the public he represents?
Well, maybe he misunderstood the fears of some people. If there is a populistic head of government, then it should be better if the Senate has more power and has more influence. And it could be dangerous in the future.
Federica, what do you think?
I think he made a mistake, and when he realized that he would not have the support, it was too late. I think that, it was a huge mistake to link the faith of a reform that I think would have changed our system for the better. There is a problem with our system at the moment. It's so complex, and this is something that we all acknowledge in Italy, and we're all asking for change, young people in the first place. And here they voted against the change because of the context, and it goes back to the unemployment is definitely a huge problem. It's 36, almost 37% of young people in Italy have no jobs. There's a lot of people that are on the verge of poverty. It's also topics that we don't discuss enough. And I think a lot of people felt a bit, put aside in the public discussion. They didn't feel cared for.
A follow-up here, Federica. If people want change so much, and the young voters you've been talking to, the 68% of them voted, along with everyone else, of youth voters, against this referendum, why were they not willing to accept a technical change to the way they are governed to make change easier? Why did they reject that if they want the change?
But that's where I think the big controversy is here. That's why I think the big mistake of Renzi was to put his political career aside, like side by side with the outcome of this referendum, and put them both at stake. And I think people they took the chance of this vote to vote against him, against the government that they are unhappy with.
May I say something?
Yeah, jump in, Alan. What do you want to say?
Because I think there's been a perversion of the word reform in the last 10 to 20 years in Europe and elsewhere, especially in Europe. Reform used to mean empowering people, used to mean giving rights to women, giving rights to young people, extending the voting age downward from 21 to 18, extending, the way workers can contribute to the management of their factories and so on and so forth. Nowadays, when people hear reform, they automatically think, oh, it means my pension's going to get cut, my wage is going to get cut, the unions don't have any more say in the matter, and in the case of Italy, the government's going to be able to sort of factually durchregieren, as Angela Merkel said, to govern through to the bottom, and to the rights of regions, for instance, are going to be cut.
Okay, but this reform aside, that is the case quite often, isn't it? Doesn't reform these days mean more austerity? Ewald, hasn't Alan identified something here that where reform once meant democracy, today it means pain?
Yes, because reform is a synonym for austerity program today. Yeah, so people are afraid of this.
Okay. They should have found another word for it. Use reform for what it's originally meant, for making things better. And then just say, what we're doing now is we're not reforming any system, we are creating pain because we want further down the line to whatever, right? And because this word has been so misused, I think people are just saying, reform? Oh, no. Reform means 40% youth unemployment in Greece, 30% in Italy and so on. It means, you know, and they say no. And yeah.
Okay, one of the issues that Italians wanted to see reform on was migration. Europeans not taking any of the Italian migrants, the migrants in Italy from North Africa and Middle East, in large numbers. Is this result the mistake of Italy's European partners, of Brussels? Isn't it something that Europe could have prevented by helping Italy more with the migration crisis, Ewald?
I'm sure that Brussels failed in solving this problem. They even were not able to make this distribution of the refugees in the different European countries. But it's also a failure of Germany, because in September last year, when hundreds of thousands of refugees were welcomed, more or less, the Federal Chancellor Merkel did not consult even the most important partners in the European Union. She just let them come in without a telephone call with Paris or with the Eastern European countries, and therefore they do not see why should they participate in this distribution program, and they are against it. This is the result. So it was a mistake and a failure from Brussels, and it was not the best way of handling the problem in Berlin.
Federica, I saw you shaking your head. Do you agree with that?
No, I agree with the fact that it was definitely an issue and it contributed to the result we saw on Sunday. It also contributed, and that was not just recently, it was in the past 2 years, to another, because we've been talking a lot about the Five-Star Movement, but there's also another political force in Italy, which is the Northern League, and they were basically at zero.
I'm going to jump in and for our viewers, remind them who the Northern League is. They're a far-right organization.
It's a far-right,
a far-right group.
Far-right party.
Okay, continue, please.
Exactly. Thank you. Which was basically, basically at zero, basically dead up to a couple of years ago, and has now reached again almost 15%. And their traditional argument, their traditional message has always been this controversial division between the North and the South. The independence of the Lombardy region, but now they really picked upon this topic of migration, and that's what made them strong again. And they really have a very strong and, I would say, disruptive message.
Okay, they're polling 15% nationally right now, from 0 to 15%.
A bit less, but like they went from 3%, I think it was 2 years ago, to almost like 13-14% now with a new leader, Matteo Salvini, who's he's got his own way of communicating, and it's effective, and it's something I see because I come from one of the cities that it's a bit of a stronghold of the Northern League in northern Italy, near Milan, and I can see that. I can see how many people are joining in. I can see people I know, side by side with Matteo Salvini. And
are we going to see new elections next year in 2017, or do we have to wait for scheduled elections in 2018 in Italy?
I don't think so. As much as the Five-Star Movement and the Northern League are really pushing for snap elections, because of course now they're at the peak, so it makes sense for them. But I really don't think we're going to see elections in as early as February or January next year, as they're suggesting. The President of the Republic, Sergio Mattarella, is completely against it. We don't have an electoral law in place at the moment. It's being examined by the Constitutional Court. So until end of January, we won't have an electoral law. So there is no context right now for sudden elections. So it might be that we're going to see the next elections actually in 2018, when they were originally planned.
That's, but Pepe Grillo would like to see them earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Alan, when you look at Pepe Grillo, does that worry you to see a man of the people, former comedian, entertainer, shoot to the top, galvanize the public? Is this a cause for concern in Italy and elsewhere?
Well, not because he's a man of the people, not because he's a former entertainer. Ronald Reagan was a great president, and he was an actor, you know. I mean, this is... why shouldn't... I mean, William Shakespeare was an actor. Why shouldn't an actor be a great literary figure and a great politician? The problem about Five-Star Movement is what they're saying. They want to take Italy out of the euro, for instance, which would lead to the collapse of the common currency. Now, you can welcome that, but I don't. I think it would lead to incredible economic disruption, and especially in Italy, by the way. But you know, so these are the things you have to worry about. I'm not worried that that Pepe Grillo is a comedian. Fine by me. I like some of my best friends are comedians. You know, you have to worry about a party that honestly thinks that Italy can win by reintroducing the lira. It's not going to, you know.
It's not going to happen. Okay, well, let's find out what Wolfgang Schaeuble has to say about that. It's not just the migration we've been talking about. The German finance minister, Wolfgang Schaeuble, has also been playing down the vote in Italy. He doesn't seem too concerned about it. Let's hear what he had to say.
Italy urgently needs a government that can function effectively. I hope that they will continue the reform program, despite the fact that the Italian people did not accept these constitutional reforms. There's no reason to start talking about a euro crisis, and there's absolutely no reason for anyone to start predicting one.
Okay, we're back here with our guest, Ewald. What do you think? Will Italy return to the lira? Does it want to? What do the people there want? Do they want to stay with the euro or a return to the old currency?
I cannot believe that they will return to the lira. They must ask themselves in what position would the European Union be and the Eurozone be without the European Union. Would it be better? Would it be different? Would it be other? So I think this is the target of populists, but in fact they don't want to come back to the lira. I cannot imagine.
Okay, Federica.
I'm sure.
What's your sense from talking to people? I want to say with the euro.
I think people want much more concrete things at the moment. They want better work conditions. They want unemployment rates to go down. That's what they want. That's what they're talking about. That's what they're frustrated about. And the lira debate, it's pointed out by few, but it's not at the top of people's heads at the moment.
Okay. The populists we just saw there, that we've been talking about, rather, across Europe, not only in Italy, are sensing victory right now at this moment. They have the win in Italy. They have some major gains elsewhere. They have been out, of course, rallying their bases, stirring up emotions that are already peaking right now, as we've seen with the Five-Star Movement. It is a debate, though, that requires, instead of emotion, some very tough debate and hard decisions. Let's, since we've been talking about Italy so far, look at what some of Europe's populist leaders have been saying. We begin with Pepe Grillo.
We have to take our scepter and smack them in the face with it. Our no vote is not political. It is the vote of every individual. It is an existential no and a social no.
We must not feel ashamed when we say we are proud to be Austrians.
The EU is making a mess of virtually everything. First we had the Eurozone, then we had the EU's common asylum policy, compounded hugely by Angela Merkel.
This is our nation, this is our state, this is our country. And we will take this country back, bit by bit.
Well, the type of rhetoric we just saw there failed to convince Austrian voters in an election over the weekend to put Norbert Hofer in office, the far-right leader of the FPO. Why did they fail to connect in Austria, the populists, in the way they did in Italy? As an Austrian, what do you think?
Well, they failed in this concrete election, but nearly half of the voters voted for him. And since Mr. Hofer is not a federal president, he might be one of the next federal chancellors, because the FPÖ, which is a far-right but not not extremist party, but right-wing populist party, so he could be the next head of government. So they did not fail so much. Maybe it was an advantage for them not to have the position of the federal president, but the more important position of the federal chancellor in the future might be.
Okay, so the far right has lost this skirmish, but the battle continues, so to speak.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Alan, do you see the far right being strengthened going out of this election result in Austria?
Yeah, I mean, no, they weren't strengthened by the result. They lost the election, okay, but I agree totally with what Ewald just said. They're coming back, because you heard from all these clips, what they're saying, there's two elements here. The one is democracy. They feel, the people who vote them feel disenfranchised, and they say the way we get back our vote is by taking control of our country. And they have a point, because historically the nation state and democracy have gone hand in hand, and we still don't have institutions which work on a European level to give people the idea that they're controlling their destiny. The euro, for one, is totally abstract. The decisions made there by Mr. Draghi or whoever are controlled nowhere. So that one can understand this idea, we'll take back our country. It won't work because the world's different, but maybe they'll just have to experience that.
The world's different, but what hasn't changed is the need for debate. In Austria, people there, government institutions there, decided to bring the far right into the fold, to debate them, to talk to them, to include them in the discourse, something that's not happening here in Germany right now. Is there something, a lesson, that Austria can give to Germany in terms of how to deal with the far right?
I think it's a mistake to copy them. It's a mistake to isolate them. Austria has many experiences half a generation ago, in the year of 2000, when the ÖVP, so the Conservative Party, had a coalition with this FPÖ, because otherwise the so-called Grand Coalition, which we had for decades, would be weaker and weaker, and FPÖ, as an opposition party, more and more powerful. So it was necessary to make it, and to show if they are able to make political strategy. So when the EU had the so-called sanctions against Austria, it was very bad. It still is a damage in the image of EU in the Austrians.
In the Austrian electorate. What do you think, Alan? Should the far right be pulled in here in Germany into the debate?
Into the debate, they already are. I mean, they're defining the debate. Look at the last CDU party conference, where they decided on a ban of the burqa. That's been demanded by the.
But the individuals are not included in the debate. They're not welcome.
Well, it's a matter of time. I mean, they will get what, 20% next election in the Bundestag. They will be in the Bundestag, and if they're still around in 4 years, the CDU will have a coalition with them, and it won't be the end of the world.
Okay, let's look towards the future. What's going to happen come spring? There's elections in France and the Netherlands, and in September here in Germany. Federica, are people worried in Italy right now about what's going to happen in terms of populist gains in places like France and Holland?
Yes, I mean, I think they look inward, and I mean, the fact that it was quite a funny coincidence that the referendum and the Austrian election happened on the same day, and I think a lot of people in Italy were like relieved, you know, when they saw that the result in Austria.
Okay.
So yes,
and vice versa. I think many Austrians were quite happy that Renzi had to resign, because
Yeah, but that's the interesting thing, isn't it? That The thing is, in Europe, we are really interested in interior politics of other countries. We really worry. And this is something the populists are not going to be able to roll back. The fact that Austria, not only Austria, but Italy, Greece, interests us here in Germany in a way which it never would have done 10, 20 years ago. I think that's really... the populists aren't going to be able to do away with that.
And people know how to hurt the so-called elite when they are always told, don't vote for far right and so on. Yeah? So they know how can demonstrate and protest and hurt. And of course, they vote for these parties.
Okay, well, we have some more votes coming up. We're going to be seeing how that's going to be going. A lot to talk about. I'd like to thank our guests for being with us today. Federica Baggio from Italy, DW correspondent. Thanks so much for being with us. Ewald König from Die Zeit and other newspapers, a free journalist here working in Berlin. And, of course, Alan Posener, as ever. Thank you so much for your comments. And thank you for being with us here today on Quadriga. We look forward to your visit the next time around. Until then, goodbye.